I want to start with something so ordinary it barely qualifies as an event. It was a Saturday morning in November. The particular kind of November morning that arrives before you have fully accepted that summer is gone. Gray and still, and with a cold in it that catches you slightly off guard, even though it catches you the same way every year. I was making pancakes. My son, who was 9 at the time, was sitting at the kitchen table doing something with a coloring book that had stopped being interesting to him approximately 4 minutes after he'd opened it, which is the specific relationship 9-year-olds have with coloring books. I ran out of flour. Not entirely out. There was flour in the cupboard, but not enough. A cup and a half where I needed 2.5. The kind of problem that is entirely solvable with minimal effort if you happen to live next door to someone who bakes, which I did. My neighbor, I'll call her Diane, had lived in the house to the left of ours for 6 years. She was in her early 60s, retired, I understood, from something in healthcare, though I had never been specific about the details because we were the particular kind of neighbors who existed in a state of warm but bounded friendliness. We waved. We spoke across the garden fence occasionally. She had helped me carry something heavy once, and I had taken in a parcel for her twice. She kept an ordered garden and owned a cat I had watched cross through our garden periodically without any apparent concern for boundaries. I knocked on her door to ask to borrow a cup of flour. What happened in the following 10 minutes is the reason I am telling you this story. Diane answered the door after a short wait, long enough that I had considered leaving and driving to the shop instead. When she opened it, she was wearing what appeared to be work clothes rather than weekend clothes, which struck me as mildly unusual for a Saturday morning, but not in any way I would have thought to remark on. Behind her, visible through the hallway into the kitchen beyond, were things I registered in the way you register details in a space before you have any reason to be paying attention to them. A desk, not a kitchen table, a proper desk, positioned against the far kitchen wall, with 2 monitors, a bookshelf I could see the edge of, filled with what looked like medical texts, a whiteboard, partially visible through the kitchen doorway, covered in handwriting I couldn't read from where I was standing. She smiled when she saw me, and said, of course, about the flour, without hesitation, invited me in while she found it. I stood in her hallway. The hallway was ordinary, hooks with coats, a side table, a small mirror, a mat. What was not ordinary, and what I noticed in the way you notice things that don't fit a framework you didn't know you had, was the notice board on the hallway wall. Printed documents, pinned in a grid. Names, dates, numbers I didn't recognize, and 1 photograph, a printed photograph, slightly faded at the edges. That I did. It was my son. I am going to describe the moment of recognition carefully, because I think it matters. It was not a dramatic shock. It was more like the sensation of stepping on a stair that isn't there. A fraction of a second of wrongness before your brain catches up and tells you what has happened. My son's face, in a printed photograph I had never seen, pinned to my neighbor's hallway notice board alongside documents I didn't understand. He was younger in the photograph than he was now, perhaps 6 or 7, standing in what looked like a park, midway through laughing at something. I recognized the jacket. It was one he had grown out of 2 years ago. Diane came back from the kitchen with the flour before I had moved. I want to say something about what I did next that I think is important. I did not pretend I hadn't seen it. I have thought about this since, whether a different version of me would have taken the flour, said thank you, gone home, and spent 3 days deciding whether to say anything. I think that version of me exists, but she is not the version who was standing in that hallway on that Saturday morning, looking at her son's face pinned to a notice board. I pointed at the photograph. I said, quietly, that I thought I recognized the person in it. Diane looked at the notice board. Then she looked at me, and I saw something in her face that I had not expected. Not guilt, exactly, and not surprise. Something more like the expression of a person who has been waiting, with patience and without particular anxiety, for a door to open. The expression of someone who had always known this conversation was eventually coming, and had decided, somewhere along the way, to be ready for it when it did. She said, "Why don't you come and sit down?" She made tea. I have noticed that this is what people do when the thing that needs to be said is large enough that it requires the small ritual of making something first. My hands were not shaking. I was not frightened. I was something I can only describe as very, very still. The specific stillness of a person who understands they are about to receive information that will reorganize things, and who has decided to be still enough to receive it clearly. She sat across from me at her kitchen table. The desk with the 2 monitors was behind her. I could see the whiteboard more clearly now. The handwriting on it was a list of names. My son's name was not on it, but the format of it, dates, notes, coded abbreviations I couldn't interpret, suggested a system. She said, "How much do you know about what happened to your son 3 years ago?" I need to go back before I can go forward. 3 years before the Saturday with the flower, my son, who was 6 at the time, had gone through a period of what his school described as difficulty settling. Not unusual language for a 6-year-old. The school mentioned it at a parents' evening. He was easily distracted, struggling to sit still, getting frustrated in ways that sometimes ended with him crying in class over things that seemed disproportionate to the situation. His teacher was kind about it. She used the word adjustment. She said some children took longer to find their rhythm. I had taken him to the GP. The GP had said he seemed fine, bright, responsive, within normal range for his age. I had gone home and watched him more carefully for a few weeks and decided the school was probably right, that he was adjusting, and that the adjustment would resolve itself. It had resolved itself. Over the course of about 4 months, he had settled. The reports from school improved. He seemed happier, more focused. I had attributed this to time, to maturity, to the natural settling the GP and the teacher had both predicted. I had not thought much more about it. What Diane told me, sitting at her kitchen table on a Saturday morning while I held a cup of tea I had not drunk, was that the adjustment had not resolved itself through time. She had noticed my son in the garden. She had noticed specific things about the way he moved, the way he responded to stimulation, the way he interacted with objects and with me. She noticed these things because she had spent 30 years as a pediatric occupational therapist, a fact I had never known about her because I had never asked, and because she had never offered it. She had recognized a pattern, not a diagnosis. She was careful to say that, and I understood why, but a pattern of sensory processing difficulties that she had seen in hundreds of children over the course of a career, and that she had learned were highly responsive to specific, targeted, early intervention. Without telling me, without introducing herself as a professional, without, as far as I had known, doing anything other than being the woman next door with the ordered garden and the cat, she had begun quietly, carefully, obliquely helping my son. I want to spend some time on this part, because it is the part I have turned over in my mind more than any other in the 2 years since that Saturday morning, and I think it is the part of the story that contains everything important. Diane had not intervened in any dramatic sense. She had not spoken to his school without my knowledge. She had not arranged appointments or made referrals or done anything that required my involvement or awareness. What she had done was smaller than that, and also considerably larger than that. She had begun talking to him across the garden fence. Just talking about her garden, about her cat, about whatever he seemed interested in on any given afternoon. She had, over several months, learned what he responded well to and what overwhelmed him. She had made adjustments to how she spoke to him, how much sensory information she presented at once, how she structured the interactions. It was not therapy. It was more precise than that. It was someone who knew exactly what they were looking at, making deliberate choices about how to engage with what they were seeing, without ever making it visible as a deliberate choice. She had also done something else. She had written to his school, not as a concerned neighbor, but anonymously, to the SENCO, the Special Educational Needs Coordinator, a letter suggesting that this particular child might benefit from some specific classroom adjustments, citing the research basis for the suggestion, detailing what to look for and what might help. She had not signed it. She did not know if the school had acted on it. She had simply sent information into the space where it was needed and let it do whatever it was going to do. And then there was the notice board. The photograph, the dates, the notes, those were her records. Not clinical records, personal ones. The way she kept track of what she observed, what she tried, what seemed to work. The way a person who spent 30 years caring professionally for children continues to care, even after retirement, because the caring is not something that switches off with the job. She had been watching over my son, not in the way that requires a conversation or a relationship or even an acknowledgement, in the way that some people, quietly and without requiring anything in return, simply do. I sat at her table for a long time after she finished telling me this. Then I asked her one question. I asked her why she hadn't told me. Her answer is the part of this story I have thought about most. She said, "Because you would have felt like you'd missed something, and you hadn't missed anything. You were doing everything right. I didn't want to give you a thing to worry about that was already being addressed." I sat with that. It took me longer to absorb than I expected. She was right that I would have worried. I know this about myself. I would have taken what she said and turned it into something I needed to research and act on and manage. I would have carried it as a weight, as evidence of something I should have noticed sooner, as material for the specific guilt that parents carry about the things they did not catch. She had looked at me across a garden fence over the course of months and had understood that about me without my telling her, and she had made a decision, based on that understanding, about what would actually help my son versus what would simply give me something to be anxious about. I am not going to tell you I found this easy to accept, because the other side of what she was describing, the care, the attention, the deliberate expertise she had quietly directed at my child, was the fact that she had made decisions about my son without telling me, that she had assessed him, formed conclusions, and acted on those conclusions, all without my knowledge. And however benevolent the intention, however accurate her reading of the situation, however much my son had benefited, that fact had a complicated edge to it that I needed to sit with honestly. We talked about that too. She did not minimize it. She said she had gone back and forth about it many times, that there had been moments when she had decided she was going to knock on my door and tell me everything, and then had stepped back from that decision because she could not find a way to have that conversation that didn't risk doing more harm than the quiet alternative. She also said, and this is the sentence I have returned to most often, that she had been wrong not to tell me, not wrong to help, wrong to do it in a way that removed my choice, that if she could go back to the beginning, she would have introduced herself differently, found a way to offer what she knew that let me decide what to do with it. I don't know if that's true. I genuinely don't know whether an earlier version of that conversation, at the beginning, rather than 3 years in, would have produced the same outcome, whether I would have taken what she offered or dismissed it, whether my son would have had those 4 months of improvement without her quiet involvement. What I know is that the conversation we had on that Saturday morning, over tea I didn't drink and flour I had forgotten I came for, changed the way I understood what it meant to live next to someone. I have been trying to find a way to end this story for 2 years, which is approximately how long I have been telling it to myself. The easy version ends with, "And now Diane and I are close friends, and my son adores her, and everything is neatly resolved." That version exists and is largely true. My son does know her now, properly. She is the person he goes to when he wants to talk about something he finds hard to say to me. She has become, without any formal arrangement, a kind of presence in his life that I did not know he was missing until it was already there. She has stopped keeping the notice board. She says she doesn't need to anymore. But I don't want to end there, because the easy version misses the thing I actually learned. I have lived next to people my whole adult life, neighbors, in the specific sense of the word, people whose houses share a wall with mine, whose gardens share a fence, whose lives I intersect with through the particular proximity of adjacent space. And I have always understood the relationship with neighbors as something essentially bounded, warm but limited. The wave over the fence, the borrowed cup of flour, the parcel taken in, neighborliness as a surface agreement about coexistence. What Diane did, and what I have not been able to stop thinking about since, is that she understood something about neighborliness that I didn't. She understood it not as coexistence, but as attention, as the particular kind of watching that happens when you live close enough to someone to notice them without being asked to, as the responsibility that comes, whether you want it or not, when you are placed by geography in a position to see something that someone else cannot see about their own life. She acted on that responsibility, imperfectly, in a way that had edges I still find complicated, but she acted on it, and my son, who is now 12 and doing more than fine, is at least partly who he is because of what she saw across a garden fence and quietly decided to do about it. I knocked on her door for a cup of flour. I did not know that a cup of flour was going to be the thing that showed me something I had been living next to without seeing for 3 years. That is the version of neighborliness I am trying to practice now, not the wave over the fence, the paying of attention, the willingness to see and then to decide, with more honesty than Diane allowed herself the first time, and with more humility than I had before that Saturday morning, what to do with what you see. That is karma filed. Real people, real proximity, real choices made quietly in the spaces between ordinary interactions. If this one reached you, and I think it might, because we have all lived next to people we thought we knew and found out we didn't, or found out we did in ways we hadn't expected, subscribe, hit the bell, and leave me a comment. Did you ever discover something about a neighbor that changed how you saw them? I read every single one. I'll see you in the next video.